This will raise up from there. B'tshuva nechona, if a person repents properly, the kavana atzuma, and he has very, very great intention. B'kriya shema she'alamita, when he says kriya shema before he goes to bed. Now, Jewish people, religious Jewish people, we say Shema Yisrael twice a day, in the morning prayer and the evening prayer. But there's also a special thing made from the rabbis, and it's very, 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 very based and necessary, according to Kabbalistic teachings, that before you go to sleep, you should say Shema Yisrael. First of all, a Jew, before he dies, is supposed to say Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, means that listen, Jews, or understand, Jews, God is our power, and God is one. God is one means that God is creating everybody. God creates everything, every miracle, every molecule, every atom, every spirit, everything that exists. God is creating it, and He's creating it for a purpose. That's why He's called the God of Israel, because He's creating it for a God of purpose. You're supposed to say this before you go to bed, and not just this one sentence, but there are several paragraphs in the Psalm of King David, and also a prayer of a confession that you're supposed to say every night before you go to bed. If a person says it with intention, thinking about what he's saying, says that according to the Arizal, now the Arizal was the great master of Kabbalah, of Kabbalistic teachings for our time. He lived about 400 years ago, 450 years ago. And in Muromas, it says, so he said that according to the Kabbalistic teachings, if a person says Kriya Shema before he goes to bed, and he says it with great intention, and he understands the words, of course, understands the meaning of the words, he really takes it to heart, is that will fix up the energy that went out from his procreative powers that went out for nothing, for the one that didn't have a receptacle. When Moromas b'Gemora, it says hence in the Gemora, call Hakora Kriya Shema Lamitazo, a person that reads Kriya Shema on his bed, Ki'ilu, it's as though, Oches, he grabs Cherev Shel Shtei Piot, it's like he grabs a sword of two edges, a two-edged sword. La'arog Gufa Tachitzonim, to kill the bodies of the forces of evil, Shenase Lavush, that became garments, L'chayos Shebatipos, to the life force which is in the semen. Va'ola Chayos Misham, and when you say Shema Yisrael properly, one edge of the sword kills the bad energy that you released, kills releases this bad energy, and the other one raises it up to its source. This whole idea of Siman is a very interesting idea because it's the source of all life. It's the source of all life. On the other hand, people use sexual things for their own pleasure. Nowadays, especially, the world has become obsessed with sexual pleasures, and the last thing that they're thinking about is seed. Where the seed goes, they don't want children. People don't want children. They don't want themselves. The pleasure, life is really basically meaningless according to these people. But you get pleasure. Pleasure it makes life worthwhile. You can't stop a person. Pleasure, they're pleasurable. Says the Rabbi exactly the opposite. The fact of the matter is that God put pleasure into the sexual act. This is in order to induce people, to encourage people to have children, because children are so important. Because God was willing to risk His rulership over the world and let people think that they're the rulers. You do this sexual act and you get pleasure. So a person does it, he feels like he's the holy temple. He does a certain thing and he gets a pleasure from it. He's making a sacrifice to himself. And he feels good. And it works worldwide. And there's all sorts of deviations, of sexual deviations, homosexuality and lesbianism and all these crazy things with the LGBT, and they have the LGBTQ, now there's queers and there's this. And the whole idea behind it is pleasure is the purpose of life. Pleasure is the purpose of life. I live for what I can receive. Pleasure is the main thing. What about the semen that goes to waste? That is symbolic of the whole pleasure-seeking movement, is that everything goes to waste. Either there was the rock and roll song, nothing really matters. Just do whatever you want to. Life is but a dream. Just do whatever. The main thing is pleasure. Pleasure that really exists. That's really real. What I get. Pleasure. Says the Rebbe that is the source of sin. The source of sin, the source of evil, the source of destruction. The source of destruction is that I don't want anything to do with a creator. I don't want to be a creator man. I'm the opposite of a creator person. And that's this idea of every human being, a healthy human being, has the power to procreate. To use this power is a God-given power, and he becomes a partner with God. It says that when a person gives birth to a child, there's three partners, the mother, the father, and God. God obviously gives the life to the child, but the parents don't look at it that way. Parents don't look at it that way. So it's a very selfish way of looking, and external, that's why klippa, it's a very external, it's superficial way of looking at life, that pleasure that we get from sex, that's the main purpose of sex. Which the fact of the matter is the pleasure that you get, that's just the surrounding level of the sex. The main thing is supposed to be the giving birth of a child, right? The birth of a child, or the togetherness of the father and the mother, the husband and the wife, togetherness. But the pleasure is just, if you want to say, a side thing, a very good, positive thing, if used positively. But the temptation to use it not positively, to use it selfishly, is so great that it's very, very difficult. That's the big problem of the Jewish people in general, and of the Mashiach especially, will be to convince people to use this power properly. Not like some of the other religions that say you have to be a celibate and that's totally bad. That's also ridiculous. That's maybe even more destructive. Both of them are anti-life. Not to have any children at all, not to have any sexual relations whatsoever, that's also doesn't make people get born. Right? That's also a big, a twist, a crookedness of how to look at what life really is. The sexual act is very good and it's very important. In Judaism it's called kiddushin. A man marries a woman, it's called holiness. Kiddushin, it's supposed to be a holy thing. And it's supposed to be that the pleasure that's felt is something personal between them. It's something that makes a bind between them. But the essence is supposed to be the power of life that's given from one to the other. If a person misuses this, it releases tremendous amounts of energy to the bad. Because in a way, that is the personification, the essence of what bad is. Using pleasure for yourself and not using it for others. In this case, to give birth to others. Therefore, the sin of releasing semen for no reason, just for pleasure, is not mentioned in the Torah. It's not mentioned in the Torah as one of the sins of forbidden sexual relationships. Even though that in some ways it's worse than them. And the sin is even greater. Because of the tremendous impurity and klippa and shells, superficialness that it gives birth to, and it's very, very, prolific when a person releases semen for no reason, for levatella. Yoter, even more than bios asuros, more even than forbidden sexual relationships. Why? Because here the semen is just going to nowhere. It's going to but only in forbidden sexual relationships. Mosif koach v'chayos beklippa tamei biyoter. It adds power and energy into impurity until the eno yochol lalos misham. It cannot go up from there. Achayos b'tshuva. Unless a person does tremendous tshuva. What do we say? For the sin of releasing semen for no reason, as a person, if he, on Kriya Shema Alamita, Kriya Shema, before he goes to bed, if he says it properly, is that fixes up that sin, that transgression. It fixes it up. But if he doesn't do it, it doesn't fix it up, it just releases bad selfishness in all of the spiritual worlds. All the spiritual worlds. But if a person, God forbid, has a forbidden sexual relationship, for sexual, and there's a receiver of this semen, so then the sin is much worse. The sin is much worse, but the general energy released is less because there's a receptacle. And it's much harder to do tshuva, it's much harder to repent for an actual sexual relationship than it is to repent for semen unnecessarily, the zera lavatala it's called. And here the Rabbi explains it. Why? Look at the Haggah in the footnote. Mipenei, because it says that if a person has a forbidden sexual relationship, in other words, there is a receiver for this semen, then the sin is much greater, and it's very, very difficult for it to raise up, because there's a receptacle. It says Mipenei, because shekalita b'yesod the nukva the klipa, because if a person has a forbidden sexual relationship, then the energy that comes out of his body has what's called yesod the nukva, yesod of feminine of klipa. Yesod and a man is the place where the bris is. Yesod in the woman is the place where the bris enters in order to have. So if a person has a forbidden sexual relationship, then there's a receptacle for that. There's what's called the yesod. God forbid a person has a relationship with an animal. The koletet chayot mikadusha, and the life force from holiness, because everything comes from holiness, goes into the wrong place. Which is not the case if a person releases siman with no purpose. There's no receptacle of klippa from the bad side. It's just that the powers that are released, the powers of procreation that are in the seed, are released. They're released to bad in general. The forces of evil in general receive more energy from this. That's why it says one of the reasons why God destroyed the flood. Why he destroyed this is because shiches kol basar darko al oretz, that all the animals were improperly using their power of procreation. According to some opinions, that's where the dinosaurs came from, because they gave birth. They could have relations with one another, and they gave birth. Somehow or other, the animals God expected something from them before the flood, and now He doesn't expect something from them. Nevertheless, what's the Rebbe trying to say here? The Rebbe is trying to say like this: there is an entire system. We'll get to it even more in the next chapter. There's a system going on which is totally above and beyond any scientific way of discerning it. And that's the system of good and bad according to the Torah. The Torah has a system of good and bad that's not just something that people sat up and they made up. It's not just one way of looking at the world. The system of good and bad is an absolute system of what pleases God and what doesn't please God, and how it actually comes into physical manifestation sometimes in the world. Sometimes it comes. There are stories that there was once a woman that came to the Rebbe, and she said that her child was having the thoughts of idolatry. He was attracted to go to the church. And the Rebbe said, check the milk that he's drinking. It could be that the milk was not observed by a rabbi when it was milked. There's a law called Chalav Yisrael. And she changed it and the child stopped. It was a well-known story. It was going around in Chabad for a long time. Rabbi Mendel Futevas, one of my teachers, told me that there used to be, 100 years ago, it started before that, there were Jews that knew the whole Torah. They knew all of the mitzvah commandments, and they went against God purposely. They wanted to live a free life, do what they wanted to. Some of them were very talented people, some of them were artists, some people just wanted to have a good time. That's all they wanted. Why should they be denied all this not kosher food and these not Jewish women? Why? So they decided to be free, but they knew Torah, and they knew mitzvahs, and they could pose as religious Jews. And their goal was to make as many religious Jews, non-religious as possible, to free them from the shackles of the dark ages, etc., of Judaism. So one of the ways they would do it, was they would come into a town and they would pose as a shochet, as a ritual slaughterer. Jewish meat has to be slaughtered in a very, very exact way. There's a lot of laws that are involved in knowing how to be a ritual slaughterer. It's not just to cut off the head, say a blessing, cut off the head. It's very, very exact laws, and a person has to have a lot of fear of heaven to be afraid to do the wrong thing. Not what's going to happen to him, but just in general. And these people would come and they would pose as they knew all the laws and they knew everything, and before they would slaughter the chicken or whatever, they would take the knife, they would give the knife to be checked. The knife has to be smooth and sharp. It would be checked. And before they would slaughter the chicken, they would hit the knife on a button, something like that, a little piece of metal or something. However they would do it, they knew how to do it. They would hit it and make a little nick in the knife. If there's a little nick in the knife, it disqualifies, makes it not kosher. And in that way, they would feed the whole entire congregation not kosher food. And suddenly, people started having doubts if God really exists and maybe other religions are right. And it had an effect on them. And they knew that it had an effect. So we see that there's a whole different sort of a system, a dynamics going on underneath the spiritual system. And that's what the Rabbi is saying here. Elim Cain, he says, if a person has forbidden sexual relationships, then the energy is trapped and it's much deeper. And a person cannot fix it up by just saying Shema Yisrael on his bed with tremendous intention. Elim Cain, unless Yaset Tshuva Me'ava Rabba, unless the person does Tshuva from such great love, Ad Shezadonot Naselo Zechiyot, until that his purposeful sins become like merits, like we said before. And this we can understand what the rabbis say. Ezahum avos, what is a crookedness? Shalo yochol taken, that it cannot be straightened out. What is a sin that cannot be fixed? Zeh shebo la'erva, this is if a person has sexual relations with someone forbidden to him, someone else's wife, his mother, his daughter, God forbid, and holy mamzer, and gives birth, the person becomes pregnant and gives birth to what's called a mamzer. Now a mamzer in Judaism is a very, very bizarre law. And if you don't look at it in the proper way, it seems to be very cruel. But the law is that a person that has relationship with someone that's forbidden to him on punishment of death. If a woman has relations with a non-Jew, a Jew has relations with a Jewish woman has relations with a non-Jew, it's not punishable by death. Now, that's not the punishment that's in this, but if a person has relations with a with a married woman, even though she doesn't know that she's married. Let's say her husband ran away. She doesn't even know if he's alive. Is he alive? Is he not alive? She doesn't know. Or he gave her a bill of divorce, and the bill of divorce wasn't good. Right? Something was missing there. The witnesses weren't proper. That child that's born from there is called a mamzer. Now, a mamzer is a person in Israel. He's a Jew just like everybody else. But all of his children will be mamzers also. What is it, mamzer? A mamzer cannot technically marry a Jew. There's ways to get around it. You can marry a slave. Very difficult. For all generations, his children are always mamzers. It doesn't make any difference what he does. His children will. Sha'az then, gam im yaset tshuva gadola. Even if he does tshuva so much, he cannot lift this life force back to Kedusha, like killing somebody. You can't make the person come back alive. The person has relations with someone forbidden to him, and they give birth to a child. There he is. The child is the fruits of his sin. And you can't fix it up. You cannot raise it up to holiness because it already came down into this physical world and it's enclosed in a body, basar v'dam. So if a person has, God forbid, releases semen for no reason, just for pleasure, so that can be fixed up because there's no receptacle. Even though that he did add evil to the world, he released selfishness and destruction to the world. Who knows if all the neurosis and the psychosis and all these things, like there was the big thing with Freud, they say he made a sexual revolution. People were very prude, they were prudish before the Victorian, and Freud released everybody to this. Who knows what he released? What type of terrible, ridiculous demons that he released on mankind. He invented all these neurosis and psychosis that the things didn't basically exist. Now everybody reads books and they say, "Oh, I feel terrible. I'm not sick. What's wrong with me? I should be sick." My mother used to beat me. I probably have a neurosis, but I didn't know. It must be hidden somewhere. So the fact is that if a person wants to connect to the Creator, it's not only through Torah and it's not only through the commandments. It's the way he eats, the way he sleeps, the way he talks, the way he is with his wife, how he acts with his children, how he acts with other people. The most mundane things in the world also are ways of serving the Creator and putting the Creator into his creation so that we can see the Creator. That's the idea of Mashiach. Mashiach will bring the whole creation to realize that there's a Creator, like we say 3 times a day in Aleinu, Yakiru v'yedu kol yesh v'tevel. Everyone will know. Yifnu elecha kol rishei oretz. All the evil people of the world will turn to God. So it all depends on us. Let's do it.